Steve, here with Dr. Rodney VanPelt. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning, Steve. Good to be with you again.
So let's talk about niacin today. I know that's a big one for you. You've done a lot of research on niacin, also known as B3. So first, where can we find niacin? What foods?
Well, niacin's found in a lot of foods, but it's found in meat and fish and many vegetables. In relatively small amounts, but enough to meet the USRDA. Can be found easily in food, and pellagra, the deficiency disease caused by an insufficient amount of B3, is uncommon. It's rare, actually. It's beyond uncommon in Western civilization.
Okay, so, but it's something that you take a lot of. So talk about that. I mean, if it's something that's rare to be deficient in, why do you take so much?
Yeah, and so I want you to have a sense of how much I take. Okay, the USRDA is kind of between 14 and 18 milligrams per day for adults. And I take 3,000 milligrams a day. I take 1,000 milligrams 3 times each day. And I started doing this because it normalizes blood lipids. It normalizes the lipid profile. It wants to lower total cholesterol, increase LDL, lower LDL and increase HDL, and lower triglycerides. And it normalizes lipids better than any drug or any combination of drugs. It is really good at it. And I have the best lipid profile of any patient I've ever seen. That I'm not saying the best in the world, there's a lot of people out there. But I haven't come across a lipid profile as good as mine before. It just made a big bump in my HDL, which wasn't awful in the first place, and a big lowering of my LDL and a lowering of my total cholesterol. It also lowered my triglycerides significantly, but they already weren't high. But that's how I started with my interest in niacin came, and that's the reason that I did it, was to improve my lipid profile, to improve it. Yeah, and it was very successful at that. It turns out there's a lot more benefits to it than that I just hardly knew about as I began.
It is amazing, and it's something that, again, if you guys watch the what 5 supplements do I take, it's not on my top 5 list, but it's something I also take every day, and it lowers cholesterol. Again, we're not doctors. Oh, no, wait a minute. He is a doctor. But these are our opinions. We're throwing this out. You guys go do your own research and see what you think for yourself. So it also reduces the risk of heart disease. Obviously, we just talked about that, but what about inflammation? Does it affect that?
It does. It's an antioxidant, and it does reduce inflammation kind of systemically. It also facilitates DNA repair, and it's a coenzyme for energy production. Nicotinic acid, which is another name for niacin, is an immediate precursor of NAD and NADH, NADP. These are coenzymes in the cycle of producing energy. Our mitochondria use these to create energy. So that's one of its benefits, is it wants to promote energy, the person to be energetic. And it seems that melatonin combined, really preceding the dose of niacin, and you can check on that Dr. Katz, K-A-T-S, lectures about that It's a very interesting idea, and I do combine those to facilitate the production of energy specifically from the niacin.
And, reducing inflammation, that would improve your blood pressure, right?
Reducing inflammation benefits us in almost every way. As best I can figure, all chronic disease is mediated by inflammation. Okay, so including cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, strokes, autoimmune illnesses, they're all mediated by inflammation. So it actually helps, let's just leave it at a lot of things are helped. Things that reduce inflammation help us in almost every way. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah, so I guess niacin would be on your top 5 of supplements.
Uh, Probably. Yep, that is one of the hardest things. We'll do that another day, the top 5, and it will just like
I know, it's torture.
squeeze it down to 5. Because I mean, I'll tell you and the viewers, I take more than 5 supplements a day.
Well, so do I. I take about 20
Yeah, I
at least.
take a lot, and every one that I take, I believe, has a strong a scientific and clinical basis for it, that there is really good reason to take them. And I suppose some are perhaps more specifically important to me than others. And niacin has been really good for me. It does other things. So we talked about lipids and increasing energy. It does lower blood pressure, as you described. It's a vasodilator. Okay, that means it makes the blood vessels, the smooth muscle in the blood vessels, it makes them relax. And so it opens the tube up a little bit, and that reduces the pressure for the blood to flow through, and it improves circulation and lowers our blood pressure. These are things related to heart disease.
Wow.
And so it does reduce the risk of heart disease. It also improves metabolism of sugar in our bodies and protein. And so it's helping there. It certainly reduces the risk of diabetes mellitus type 1. That's childhood onset diabetes. It doesn't seem to be as helpful with adult onset diabetes. It also has neurologic functions. This is a fascinating thing to consider, how it changes how our nerves function, specifically how our brain works. It improves cognitive function. Now, that cognitive function means it improves how we think. It helps us think better. They've shown benefit in patients with Alzheimer's disease. Okay, it doesn't cure it. It does not cure Alzheimer's, but it has shown benefit in Alzheimer's patients. And Dr. Hoffer is a Canadian psychiatrist, or he's passed away now and did his research in the 1950s, but he found schizophrenic patients to be benefited by high doses of niacin. 3,000 milligrams was a minimum, and he would treat them sometimes with 25,000, 50,000, up to 100,000 milligrams a day. Anyway, just, colossal doses of niacin.
Wow.
And he would cure schizophrenia, okay, with it. He wouldn't even call them psychotic or schizophrenics. He called them pellagrins. Pellagra is the name of the disease that's caused by low levels of niacin. And so he called them pellagrins. And he would treat them with niacin, and they got better. And I was reviewing some studies this week about niacin and schizophrenia, and so his work was done in the 1950s, but even much more recent studies show a clear benefit to, as best I could see, all of the schizophrenics who were included in the studies that I was reading, and I read about 5. that they all were benefited by taking niacin, about 3,000 milligrams a day. Anyway, there was a dramatic reduction in hospitalization and a number of days in the hospital. Both of them were dramatically reduced. Anyway, it's a fascinating thing. It helps with manic depressive disorder, with depression and anxiety as well. So anyway, it's got some amazing things there. It improves the health of our skin. It decreases the symptoms of ADHD. Hey, anything that can help, kids or adults, right? Adults can have ADHD too, but it can moderate that kind of extra energy and racing thoughts that go along with the ADHD. And it improves immunity. Not a bad thing to have on board, in this era.
Yeah, very true. So phenomenal. Sounds like what it does for brain function. And I just want to go back to something you said about improving digestion and breaking down it. So this will help break down carbs and fats and convert food into energy, which would help your metabolism. Is that all correct?
It is correct. Yep, it does. It does help with the digestion of carbs and fats, and I mentioned at the kind of early on, it's how it facilitates the conversion then of those nutrients. Carbohydrates and fats are the two. Those are really the energy, parts of our diet, our fats and carbs, and those get turned into energy, and that process happens in the mitochondria, and that's where nicotinic acid is at work, becoming NAD and NADP, which are coenzymes in the cycle that spins off energy in the form of ATP that our bodies burn, and having plenty of ATP is just good for us in every way. We feel good, right? We feel energetic, but the processes going on in our body require energy also. Like all the biochemical, physiologic processes that are going on in our body all require energy to operate. And so just kind of everything in our bodies works better when we have lots of energy, or ATP, being produced, because that's what our body burns up for fuel.
Yeah, that definitely is true. And is there anything else you want to say about niacin? I'm gonna have to go get some more niacin. It sounds like, So
Yeah,
just
well,
more stuff to take. Anything else to cap this off?
yeah, there is more things that should be said about niacin, because one of the things that most people know, probably everyone knows who's taken nicotinic acid, that it causes a flush.
Yeah,
Niacin causes a skin flush.
true.
And the first time or first times that you take it, oh my gosh, I looked like a lobster. I was absolutely red. My face and arms were just really strongly red, and I felt hot, and a little bit tingly, and that's niacin is famous for causing a flush. There are forms that don't cause a flush. They don't control lipids. They do other good things for us, but they don't normalize lipids. The nicotinic acid, which is also just full flush niacin, that is what normalizes blood lipids. And it also is the one that it has the fewest, it's extremely safe. It's the safest, you can put it that way. Some people say, well, high doses of niacin are associated with liver toxicity. And that isn't actually true. There are certain forms of it that do, and those are no flush forms that want to irritate the liver. And the nicotinic acid it helps the liver and the kidneys. Yeah.
Wow.
And so the dose I chose, you know, if you say, well, Rodney, how did you choose 3,000 milligrams, which is 1,000 3 times a day? And I take it with vitamin C also. That's routinely recommended. The two just pair together. They go really nicely. So you want to take at least equal amounts of vitamin C, you know. So I take more than 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day, but you want to take it along with your niacin. And so I chose 3,000 because I can look at the graph, and the graph curve goes up with increasing dose. Now, the curve I'm looking at is looking at the normalization of lipids. And when you get to 3,000 milligrams, the curve becomes almost flat. So I could increase my dose of niacin to, I don't know, let's say 6,000 milligrams a day, but I would hardly improve my lipid profile at all. It would just hardly even change it at all if I doubled it at that point, because the curve has turned over and become kind of levels off there. So that's how I chose 3,000. It needs a significant dose to have much effect on the blood lipids. Like 50 milligrams a day wouldn't do very much at all for blood lipids. If a person took 500 milligrams 3 times a day, you know, I take 1,000 3 times a day, but if someone took 500 3 times a day, that has, you know, significant improvement, probably not maximum improvement in blood lipids, but that'll have a strong effect. Anyway, that's just some words on dosing. When a person takes niacin regularly, the flush begins to go away. Now that I take it 3 times a day, I went to barely having a flush each time I took it. And when I added melatonin 10 minutes before taking it, the flush has gone away completely. Yeah. So
that's a good tip, to take some melatonin before.
Yes. Yep. I take 50 milligrams twice a day. People have to figure out what works for them with melatonin.
Maybe I'll bump my dosage up. I'm at 1,500.
Of niacin?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how's your lipid profile?
Well, that's why I started taking it. I mean, they're good, but it could be better. So I want to get my HDLs up higher.
Yep, and niacin's good at that. And see, this is the challenge. Like the statins, first of all, you want to know. See, remember I told you niacin, like, feeds, it fertilizes the mitochondria. Okay, those are the powerhouses of our body, and so niacin feeds them. The statin drugs poison the mitochondria. Okay, they poison them. It literally makes us tired. It makes our muscles ache. They cause muscle damage, and they do lower cholesterol. Statins will lower LDL. They will lower total cholesterol. Usually, they lower HDL also. Well,
Tears your body apart.
That's not what we want. And so you'll
Not
notice
something I'm gonna be taking in the near future or ever.
No, I am not a fan at all of statins. I would never take them, and I wouldn't recommend others to take it. I'm not telling you viewers what to do. I'm just saying I don't recommend it.
That's good. And I'm not the doctor, and I don't recommend it either.
Yeah, and you notice that when I referred to niacin and its effect on lipids, what I said was niacin normalizes lipids. You notice that I didn't say it lowers lipids or lowers our cholesterol, and that's because you don't want them all lower. HDL, it turns out, you want higher. It doesn't just lower them. Statins kind of do that. They lower everything. But niacin is better. Niacin lowers what you want lowered more than the statins, and it raises HDL. Mine went from 53 to 82. That is a huge increase. That's like a 55% increase.
That's healthy.
It is astounding.
It is. Over 60 is good.
Yeah, and to change it, to make an intervention where you increase your HDL by 55 to 60%. Okay, that's a huge change in the number. That is amazing. Statins don't do that.
No.
They don't change the numbers that much. They don't raise HDL, but they don't lower the things that much either. It's as I mentioned, it's better than any drug or any combination of drugs. They don't study it anymore. See, it used to be that niacin was used for cholesterol lowering, maybe back in the 1960s. There was nothing else available then. That was just great. It did a really good job, and it was prescribed. It was a prescription, and doctors gave it to patients to lower their cholesterol. It just was cheap because nature made it. God made it. You know, it came from nature, and God made it, so it couldn't be patented and it couldn't be expensive. But the pharmaceutical companies wanted something to compete with it that they could patent, so they worked really hard to make drugs. And at first, they would compare them to niacin, and niacin always won in every trial they ever did. The drugs that they came up with weren't as good as niacin. And so you would think, well, they would just find something better. No, all they did was stop testing against niacin. That was all. They just wouldn't include niacin in any of their research. They would just compare their drug with the other company's drug. No, and that's what you find for many decades now. All of the studies don't include niacin. They only are essentially one statin back to back with another statin, and seeing how which one nudges ahead of those two. But it turns out none of them compare with the benefits from niacin, and they just don't look at it anymore. And doctors don't prescribe it anymore. And I asked one who was unwilling to prescribe it for my mother-in-law when I went to the doctor with her, and I said, why don't you consider niacin? And she said, because we don't have recent studies establishing its benefit in reducing heart disease. And by the way, statins have been shown in some studies to reduce heart disease modestly, but they do have been shown to reduce heart disease. And niacin hasn't, certainly not recently. And that's because they just aren't even looking at it. They don't want to compare to it. It's going to do better than the statins, a lot better. But they just don't want to know. Anyway, I'm a believer in niacin.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, I'm going to have to get some more for sure, bump my dose up. So, all right, is there any other thing you can think of before we go, doctor?
No, I say do your own research. Right? I'm a big fan of patients. I tell them sometimes I want you to get a PhD in your own health. If you have an autoimmune illness, study, read. There's helpful information out there. If you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get out a pad and paper and be a student for your own health. You don't have to have a medical degree. It would be possible for you, viewer, who has, let's say, an autoimmune disease or your lipid profile. You have heart disease and your lipid profile is out of whack. You can know more about ways to improve your heart health and reduce your risk of another heart attack or stroke, and how to reduce your blood pressure without drugs. You can know more about that than your doctor does. Okay, by doing a little research, by reading a book or two, by reading online, and anyway, you can know a lot.
Yeah, everyone's different. As we always say on these interviews, everyone's different. You got to find your groove. If everyone was the same, these tests and this research would be done on one person. That's all you'd need if everyone was the same. So great advice. So thank you very much, Dr. Rodney VanPelt. And we'll be doing more of these. If you guys have suggestions, just put it in the comment section. If you'd like different topics to be talked about, we can do that. Just tell us what you'd like to see, and we'll see if we can accommodate you. So thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. My pleasure.